When people look at pictures of my family, they often see smiles and assume that everything is perfect. They see me, Jennifer, a mother who always seems to be holding everything together, and my son, Ethan, who looks like a bright, cheerful teenager. But what those photos don't reveal is the hidden pain, the silence that stretched between us, and the quiet battles my son was fighting while the world looked the other way. I grew up believing that if you gave your children love, support, and stability, everything else would fall into place. That was the kind of mother I tried to be. Ethan was my only child, and from the moment I held him in my arms, I knew I wanted to give him the kind of life where he would never doubt that he was loved. When he was little, he was the type of boy who asked a million questions, who laughed so loudly it filled the whole house, who ran into my arms every time I came home from work. I thought we were unshakable. But as the years passed and he grew into a teenager, I began to notice the changes. At first, I told myself it was just normal adolescent moodiness. He spent more time in his room, less time with me. His once bright conversations dimmed into short responses. Fine. Nothing. I'm okay. His teachers said he was quieter in class, less engaged. Friends who used to come over for sleepovers slowly stopped showing up. I'd knock on his door sometimes and find him staring blankly at his laptop, not even really using it, just lost in thought. I told myself he was just tired, maybe overwhelmed with schoolwork. But then the subtle signs began to pile up: missed assignments, late-night pacing, the way his eyes sometimes looked red as if he'd been crying, though he'd deny it every time. One night, I was cleaning up the kitchen when I heard faint noises from his room. At first, I thought he was talking to someone on the phone, but when I leaned closer to the door, I realized he was whispering to himself. His voice cracked, and I could just barely make out the words. "I can't do this anymore. I'm not good enough." My heart shattered. I didn't push open the door right then. Instead, I stood there frozen, the weight of what I'd heard sinking in. My son, my Ethan, was fighting battles I didn't even know existed. I had been so focused on work, on bills, on keeping life moving forward, that I hadn't seen the storm building inside him. The next day, I tried to act normal, but inside, I was a mess. I packed his lunch, reminded him about his science project, kissed him on the cheek, and sent him off to school as if nothing had happened. But all day long, I replayed his words in my head. That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed and made a decision. I wasn't going to ignore this anymore. If my son was struggling silently, then it was my job, not as a perfect mother, but as his mother, to break through that silence. I started small. That night at dinner, instead of asking the usual, "How was your day?" I asked, "What was the hardest part of today?" He looked at me like I had asked the strangest question in the world, but after a long pause, he shrugged and said, "Math test." I smiled, but deep inside, I knew it was more than that. Still, it was a beginning. Over the next few weeks, I tried to change the way I approached him. Instead of lecturing when he didn't do his chores, I'd ask gently if he was feeling overwhelmed. Instead of assuming he wanted space, I'd sit quietly in his room, not pushing him to talk, just being present. Sometimes, we'd watch a show together in silence, and sometimes he'd slowly start to share little pieces of his thoughts. The real turning point came one night when I found him sitting outside on the porch steps, staring at the stars. I sat down next to him, pulling my sweater tighter around me because of the chill in the air. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then, softly, I said, "Ethan, I want you to know something. You don't have to go through anything alone. Not ever. If you're hurting, if you're scared, even if you feel like you can't say the words, I'm here. Always." For the first time in months, he looked at me, not just glanced, but really looked. His eyes welled up with tears, and his voice cracked as he whispered, "Mom, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just feel heavy all the time." That was it, the door opening. I pulled him close, and for the first time in so long, he let me hold him the way I used to when he was small. We sat there together, both crying, and I realized that my son didn't need me to fix everything. He just needed me to see him, to hear him, to remind him that he wasn't broken and that he wasn't alone. The journey that followed wasn't easy. It involved conversations with school counselors, therapy appointments, long talks late into the night, and countless moments of patience. But step by step, Ethan began to find his voice again. He began to share more about the pressure he felt to be perfect, about how social media made him feel like he could never measure up, about how sometimes he just felt exhausted by life itself. And as he opened up, something inside me changed, too. I realized how often we as parents assume our kids are fine just because they aren't outwardly crying for help. I learned that silence can sometimes scream louder than words. And I discovered that the most powerful thing I could do wasn't giving advice or solutions. It was simply showing up, again and again, without judgment. Today, Ethan is doing better. Not perfect, but better. He still has hard days, but now he knows he doesn't have to face them alone. He knows that his silence doesn't scare me away, that I'll always be right there, ready to listen, ready to love him through it. And me? I've learned that being a parent isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to sit in the silence with your child until they're ready to speak. It's about noticing the quiet struggles, even when the world only sees the smiles. And most of all, it's about never giving up on the people you love most. Because sometimes the smallest thing we do, the decision to truly listen, to open a door, to change the way we show up, can change everything.